on this episode of the Mad Rush podcast.
So it's really funny when you think you've seen it all and there's just crazy things after another. So I had all of these fun stories, but I knew I didn't want it just to be a tell-all and just spilling, people's secrets. I wanted it to be something that could really impact especially younger girls, or just things that I wish I could tell my younger self, especially college age and right out of college, because there's so many things that I feel like I did and just dove in, or I wish I had not learned the hard way. So I felt like if I could take these funny wedding stories and then add in life experiences, curveballs, and then when you face these situations in real life, whether it's a crazy wedding story or just something that happens in your day-to-day, how do you react in that moment?
Welcome to the Mad Rush podcast. I'm Trisha Addix, the original Sorority Rush consultant. While the stories I have to share are nothing short of astonishing, this podcast goes beyond the wild client tales and sorority life. I'll be engaging with fascinating guests from both within and outside the Greek world, uncovering the surprising connections that bind us all together. Join me for a journey that's as entertaining as it is enlightening. Welcome to Mad Rush. Yay, hooray, hooray, hooray. I am so happy that I have this next guest here today. Her name is Sara Fay. It's a double name, Egan. And Sara Fay, I don't know, I might have told you this when we met, that I got a call from someone who had just pledged a sorority at a school. And she's like, I'm the first double name that Theta's ever taken. I was like, I didn't know that was like a criteria, but I thought that was pretty funny. So I went to the Southern Coterie Summit a couple weeks ago, and I met so many amazing people there. And today I am joined by one of these amazing women, Sara Fay Egan, like I said. And she is the author of The Through Line, Finding Happiness Through the Curveballs of Life, Family, and Business. Welcome, Sara Fay. I'm so excited to get into it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And where are you today, like physically?
I am in Dallas, Texas, where I live full time. So, yes.
So one of the main reasons I was so excited to have you on this podcast is that you talk about in your book about embracing authenticity, which is something I preach every single day, and how you shifted gears to overcome challenges. But the main reason, and I'm joking here because I didn't know this when I asked her to be on my podcast, Eli Manning praised your book. And if anybody knows anything about me, I have always been obsessed with all things Manning. Cooper, Archie, Eli, Peyton, Arch, the kids. I'm obsessed with all things Manning. So I saw that. I was like, it's meant to be. It's meant to be that she is on my podcast because she apparently has some sort of connection with him. So that's kind of cool.
Yes. Very, very sweet of him to write a testimonial. So I know you were a very sought after event planner, and now you're in a completely different field, which is pivoting. So can you tell us about your background and what led to where you are today? Sure. Well, I've been a wedding planner and event planner for 20 years, right out of college. And I joke that when I started my first job out of college, I thought my only experience was being social chair of my sorority, which I thought was experience, and it was at the time.
Back up. I know this, but where did you go to college and all that stuff? Because this is a Mad Rush podcast. So.
Yes. I went to Ole Miss. So I'm originally from Memphis. Yes, originally from Memphis, went to Ole Miss, and both my parents went there, kind of grew up my entire life going to the Grove. So I never even applied anywhere else. I just knew I was going to Ole Miss. And
yeah,
I loved it. I loved it. It was great, and was really fun. And now living in Texas, and it's become more popular for people to go to Ole Miss as well. So
Yeah, Ole Miss is awesome. Our younger son went there. He was actually in Eli Manning's fraternity, and
Oh.
so that was a obviously I wanted him to find his fit, find his people, blah blah blah. But I was like, if you are deciding between two, let's go Eli. I'm just kidding. I had no input on any of that decision, but yeah. So the Grove is awesome, and the Memphis. For those of you who don't know this, was it an hour and 15 minutes from Oxford?
Yes.
So it's pretty close.
Really close.
The Memphis connection is strong at Ole Miss. Our son had a lot of really good friends from Memphis and has visited Memphis many times to see those guys. So anyway, and what sorority were you in?
I was a Katie, so
Gotcha.
Kappa Delta at Ole Miss, and loved it. It was fun. It was great. And I say in my book, but I still tell people, and especially younger girls that will call me to want to get into event planning and want to have the perfect internship or try to figure it out. And I always tell them that I really learned more from, being social chair at my sorority or diving into Panhellenic or any of those other things in any class I took. So it really helped me so much more in event planning and real life experience. So
that makes sense. And event planning sounds so cool, but it also sounds really exhausting. So I interrupted you to go back to college. So when you got out of college, now let's go back.
Yes. So I actually met my now husband studying abroad in Innsbruck, Austria, the summer before my junior year. And we dated long distance and decided we were going to move to a big city, and always wanted to be in broadcast journalism, and decided to give event planning a try. I really had no idea what I was doing, just dove in and really loved that every day was different, and loved that I was working with people and really kind of taking their dreams, a bride's dream, and bringing it to reality. So that was really, really fun. And so looked up 20 years later and still doing it. So that was really, really fun.
You're not still doing that now though, are you?
So 3 years ago, actually, my father suddenly passed away of COVID just very quickly, and he had a restaurant group. And so overnight, I became president of his restaurant company, which was not planned. And I, said immediately, okay, well, I'm supposed to be in Aspen next week for a wedding. And I was doing both for about 3 years. And so just really couldn't do both anymore. And I have two young kids, but I loved doing both. So I just had to really pivot and look at it as what's best for this season of my life right now and my family. So
how old are your kids?
So my daughter Grace is 13 and my son Walker is 10. So we are in the thick of carpool season.
Yes, you are. And Grace was technical assistance for us when we were getting on this podcast. I was like, I heard her. I didn't see her. And I was like, I wonder how old she is. But so that brings up just the ability to pivot and to understand, which is what your book is about, finding happiness through the curveballs. And that was, more than a curveball, losing your dad to COVID. I'm sorry, so sorry for that. And that was just such a weird time. And so I had nobody as close as my father, but you would be talking to him one day and you think they're okay. And then all of a sudden you're getting news that it's not okay. And I'm sorry that it was just seemed like such a tumultuous time and just so confusing, I think is a good word for it. So.
Right. And I think I realized that, you kind of picture your life on paper and what is going to make you happy and things that check all the boxes. And then, I was going at such a fast pace in events and in a different city every weekend. And I loved it. But then once that happens or something like that, that's really a huge life-changing thing happens to you, you really kind of look around you and say, okay, what's important and how do I need to restructure my life now just for myself and my family to be happy? And maybe it really wasn't what I thought it was supposed to look like, but that's okay.
And you're right about that. That's okay. So what prompted you to write the book, and what was that process like for you?
Well, I had so many crazy wedding stories, and people for 20 years have always said, okay, you've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. And
Like you're gonna have to give us one, or give us a crazy wedding story. You don't have to give names.
okay, so one that's in the book is we had a groom that wanted to arrive to the ceremony via a helicopter outside. And so we actually hired a stunt double that looked exactly like the groom, put him in the same tuxedo, and we were outside of the botanical gardens, and I was on radio with my team, but then also with the helicopter pilot, and we made sure it was just the right timing. And then the helicopter hovered over, and the groom, or the stunt double, jumped out of the helicopter right behind the bushes. And the real groom was with my assistant at the time behind the bushes. And so the stunt double fell down behind the bushes, and the groom popped up and brushed off like he had been covered in grass and ran to the altar. So
Oh
there
my
are lots
gosh.
of crazy stories.
I actually saw that, but I wanted you to share. I didn't know which was. So, all right, you got to give us another one.
So there's so many things. There's another story that I talk about, because you meet people from all different walks of life, and that's one thing I talk about as well. That I looked up one day and said, I never dreamed about being a wedding planner, but I just kind of got caught up in it, and it was fascinating just dealing with all different people from all different walks of life, and they all have these very different dreams, and you're bringing them to life. And I'm a people pleaser at heart. And so, when this one bride, which was another crazy, crazy wedding, it was out on a farm, she had 205 chickens, and she wanted all her chickens to be part of the wedding. And she had albino peacocks, and she wanted, when people arrived to her property, for the chickens just to be walking around. And then on the timeline, I think it said 2:05 p.m. Sara Fay to wrangle the chickens, because then the chickens had to be wrangled before she started walking down the aisle. So it's really funny when you think you've seen it all, and there's just crazy things after another. So I had all of these fun stories, but I knew I didn't want it just to be a tell-all and just spilling, people's secrets. I wanted it to be something that could really impact, especially younger girls, or just things that I wish I could tell my younger self, especially college age and right out of college, because there's so many things that I feel like I did and just dove in, or I wish I had not learned the hard way. So I felt like if I could take these funny wedding stories and then add in life experiences, curveballs, and then when you face these situations in real life, whether it's a crazy wedding story or just something that happens in your day to day, how do you react in that moment? And so I include some tangible lessons, parts of the books, like a workbook, just to work through, and realize that, it shouldn't take some life-changing thing or someone passing away or a big thing like that to happen for you to realize it's okay, and you can find happiness in just the small day-to-day moments.
Yeah, and that is great. And there's so much synchronicity between what you think and do and what I think and do. And so, I am in the process of publishing a book, and it started out, and I would never tell my clients' story. I mean, I would tell the stories, but change the details or whatever, just because of privacy reasons. But I originally started, I was like, how am I going to get this information out there? How to prepare for rush, as things, just get so amped up, like everything else, like weddings are so amped up now. I mean, the helicopter being a perfect example of that, but also, being authentic to me, which is wanting to help people. And that sounds exactly like what you did. So, I mean, I have some crazy rush stories and I have a lot of them in my arsenal. Like the grandmother with a private jet whose granddaughter didn't even know she was going to go through rush. And I prepared the grandmother, and she would fly down to meet with me, unbeknownst to her, the girl going through rush. So like crazy stories like that. But then it also became, the book has become more like getting my methods out and so it's a marriage. I'm just saying it's kind of the same thing as far as the process is.
Right.
You want to entertain, but then you also want to get, in your case, the lessons that you wish you had learned along the way in there, and some ways to work through that. So can you give me some
Right.
examples? And again, I've read it, but can you give some of those lessons for our
Yes.
reader? I mean, we're going to tell everybody to buy your book for sure. But yeah, I got distracted again by the Manning thing. Sorry. I just flipped.
Well, I think, really what you're saying, it does all tie together. And that's kind of where I came up with the term, the through line, because, and it ties into Rush and going to college so well. I use the term, the through line, in almost every wedding planning meeting I've ever had. Usually that first meeting where the bride comes in or the client comes in, and you can just see the pressure on their face with that very first decision. And usually it's to save the date. And they think, okay, I've got, what are my colors going to be? What's my monogram going to be? What am I going to do? And they feel so much pressure because they've seen everything in the world on Instagram and everything in the world on Pinterest. And they've seen, people sending bottles of champagne to invite them. And, just everything's over the top now. And so I think it's just all about how do you outdo the next person? And it's the same with Rush of asking people to write your recs. And now there's care packages and all these things. And so I think that what I've always told my brides when they came in and they'd have all of these pictures, and I would just say, okay, this is great for me to look at and see that you like a floral arch. That's wonderful. I like that I can get your style, but let's put all that away. Let's get off of Instagram. Let's get off of Pinterest. Let's just kind of put on our blinders and stop looking around us, because the only way we're going to have a unique wedding is if we look within. And so it's kind of the same with Rush and those tips as well, because so I would just start asking them, okay, where's your favorite vacation you've ever had? They might say Italy. It's like, okay, well, what did you like about Italy? Well, I loved the pink bougainvillea, or I loved this, or I loved, I love homemade pastas. And so really take, okay, what does your closet look like? Let's go to your house. Let's have a meeting in your living room. And, maybe it's all tonal, or maybe they just love blue and white. And then you really get to know them and their personality. And it really brings that to life, because I feel like people think if they make one wrong decision, then everything's just ruined. Then that's the trajectory of the whole wedding. Or if they make one wrong decision, choosing the wrong sorority or choosing the wrong college, it's okay. And that's just part of your story. And it's okay to make mistakes. You are going to make mistakes, but it's how you get back up from them and pivot from them that really matters. So it all ties together.
Yeah. And that through line, I wrote down two things you said. One, the over the top. So the way you approach that is exactly how I approach my clients and what we do, because you can get distracted. You can go on Instagram and think you have to have a Louis Vuitton Neverfull or Golden Goose or whatever the brands are. And that can paralyze you, because one, even if you can't afford it, that's not what you should be focusing on when you're preparing for this. You should be able to block out all that and really look within yourself. And I truly feel or know that if you're being authentic to yourself and you're confident that you've done the preparing that is true to you, then that's when you can shine. And that's when you can have the best wedding. And that's when you can have the most successful rush or whatever it is, because there's only one you. And
right.
And then I also wrote down the look within, when you said look within, because that, like I said, is what we do. I do this very similar thing when I start talking to a client. I'm like, what is it that you want? And what do your friends say about you? And what let's identify your strengths and maybe you're not areas where you're not quite as strong. And then that's what you concentrate on, not what sorority everybody is wanting to be in and listening to all that chatter, which there is, as we know, a shit ton of chatter. So yeah, it's very, very similar what you're saying. And not lastly for the conversation, but pivoting. That is such a skill or a thing that we have to do in every aspect of our lives, whether it's little, like you said, or big, like you've lived. And being able to do that while still being true to yourself and knowing that a different path, it's okay. If you have to pivot.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that probably was really hard for you to have to pivot to a completely different life. I mean, did you have to go to Memphis?
Yes. Yes, I still go quite a bit. And honestly, I still travel, but I don't travel nearly as much as I was doing destination weddings because kind of in the end, I was planning about 4 destination weddings a year, but usually they were out of the country. So I was still gone and away from my kids about 8 weeks out of the year. So it gets to be a lot. And so now I can, because I love to travel, but I can do more day trips or shorter trips or just for the season that I'm in right now. So
yeah, and like you said, you're in carpool. You're in it right now because Grace still has 3 years before she drives, and
right,
and so
right.
it's a lot to juggle. And I'm sure that. So, are there other instances in your life that you have had to pivot, like little or big, that stick out to you?
Yes, there's a lot. Well, I think just event planning as a whole taught me how to look for those curveballs. I think when you're coming up with backup plans, just in general, and mostly I would plan destination weddings, usually involving a tent, usually in the perfect location on the perfect weather day, but not always the perfect weather day when the wedding comes around. So I was always analyzing each situation for what could happen. A lot of times we had a wedding in Maine on the coast, and we had to plan our installation schedule around the tide. So if it was high tide, you could not drive a truck onto the peninsula, onto the property. So we had to wait till it was low tide, the certain time of day, and look at all the tide charts to drive trucks on. And then they'd have to be there all day and pack a sack lunch and then drive off when it was low tide again, just to install. And I think we had 7 different weather plans for that one wedding. And we ended up with something totally different because you have to say, okay, if it's raining when guests arrive, you have to revert to this plan. If it's raining when they arrive, maybe we have a pre-cocktail hour before the ceremony and bring them inside the tent. And, if you pretend like it's the normal plan and if you give everybody a drink and a cocktail and music, then usually they're happy. So
that is so true.
and as long as you're not freaking out and smiling, then everybody else will be smiling. And so, we'd usually have that plan, another plan to pivot if it was raining during the ceremony or after. So you'd have several different plans that you'd have to call at different times. For this one particular wedding, it was hilarious because the whole ceremony was on this beautiful peninsula overlooking the water. And we had these smoke bombs that were the same technology as fireworks, but they all went off with colored smoke. And it was so, so, so pretty, and it had never been done in the United States. It had only been done in Italy at the time. And so we were determined that the weather wasn't going to ruin this beautiful ceremony. And we had already set up all the chairs, and all of the vendors that had set up the chairs had already driven back to Portland. And so we had about a 30-minute window, and I needed someone to come help me cover up all of the chairs. Everybody else, the waiters, were doing what they needed to be doing with the food. So I pivoted and called the local football coach that was about 15 minutes down the road. And this was in August. So they were having their summer practice, and he put the football team on a bus, and they came over about 20 minutes later and had all the football players cover our chairs with tarps. And then they stood there in the rain while it rained, and the guests were on their way at that moment in the buses. And then right when it stopped raining, they pulled the tarps off. We went and got however many towels we could find from Walmart, and they wiped down all the chairs. And then they ran and hid right when the buses pulled up, and it was like nothing ever happened. So
that is insanity. So how do you, it seems like there's a lot of research, and how do you do that?
There is a lot of research, but then somehow plans always fall out the
Right.
window. That definitely wasn't our plan. I think how
Right.
it happened was maybe one of the football players' dads was, working as at the lawn company. He happened to be there and
Uh,
he called him. And so you just have to call in all the reinforcements when you're down to the wire like that.
so,
So
and that's a really good point. So even if you had 7 plans, you still, you can't plan for everything. And I'm a
you
huge
cannot.
planner and I'm a huge worrier. So that's something that I think about sometimes. I'm like, I can't imagine worrying about, like, like the things that have happened to me that I've worried about happening haven't happened in a way that I could have ever figured out. So I try to train myself. Okay, I'm not going to worry about this because it's, if something bad does happen, it's probably not going to be in the way that I've worried about. So
Right.
it's so unpredictable, everything.
Yes, and I think worrying too much just paralyzes you.
Yes.
Then you just get caught up in that worry versus, when big things like that happen, or if it's literally, I've had a tornado hit a wedding. I have a chapter called When Tornadoes Hit, that, if you get paralyzed in that moment, it's like with any decision in life that you think that that's the end all be all decision. Sometimes you're not going to make the right decision, but you have to just act. And then you've got to pivot from there. So as long as you're moving forward and making decisions, I think that that's great. And you might make the wrong one and you'll learn a big lesson from that. And that's how everybody just grows and becomes more mature in their career or their life.
Do you see people? I mean, your book does this, and it helps explain that, perfection. It's, you're never. But do you see? I see a lot more pressure now for, for on these kids and these clients, and just it. And I think a lot of it is from social media and from what they're seeing, but also, it's self-imposed. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying that I just see so much more pressure on that people are putting on themselves.
Exactly. And I think it's across all walks of life, all ages. I mean, having a 13-year-old daughter right now, I definitely feel like we're in the thick of it. And I think back and, I'm so glad there wasn't social media when I was in
Oh my
college. And
gosh. Can you imagine?
no, I can't imagine. And just knowing where everybody is at all times and, with just the like button. And it's like, you kind of knew when I was growing up, you kind of knew where you stood. You knew that you had the different friend groups, or I could go, follow to different friend groups and would always be okay. But you didn't have like a scorecard if you posted a picture, how many hearts it's
Yes.
going to get and how many likes, and then immediately in your mind, I mean, I do this too. Oh, why didn't that many people like it? Did it, is it something to do
Right.
with me? And you might have the best self-esteem, but that happens to everybody. So it's definitely hard.
Yeah. I worry for, these kids with the social media. And I know this is like every person our age, or you're younger than me, but, this is our worry. But I mean, I was telling my husband last night, I made a post, I don't know, it was 4 months ago, and somehow it cropped back up. And these people were just annihilating me. Like, somebody said I had terrible eyebrows and I was all these things that were, and I'm very confident in
Mm-hmm.
my reason for doing what I'm doing. And I'm also very sure that a lot of people don't understand it, but that's okay.
Right.
But it's worth it to me to help these girls navigate this time, to also get some heat. But I cannot even imagine, like, if someone, was 13 or 13 to 40, whatever. Like, like I said, I'm 57. I'm happily married. I'm very comfortable in my skin, and with awareness that it is a world where, a lot of people are going to have a lot to say about what I do. But I still was like taken aback. I was like, I can't. And it scares me that this is one of the things that these people have to contend with
Right.
when they're younger, because
Definitely.
it still affects me. And it's also, like, to your point, I think about, so I'm also very comfortable that I have very good friends. But I still get my feelings hurt if I see, my 5 best friends posting at the beach together or even at lunch together. I'm like, well, I wasn't invited. This is
Right.
just human nature. And so
Right.
having to navigate that while going through these huge transitions and in this world, I just, like I said, the pressure I feel like is, and I don't know what the answer is. I'm just saying I see it.
Yes, it is a lot. And I think, I mean, even with me with writing this book, it was something that I was so excited about. And I didn't tell anybody I was doing it. I didn't even tell my closest friends. And I think a lot of that is you're worried what people are going to think, or you're
Right.
worried what people are going to say. And I kind of waited until I was finished with it. And then I told people, because I guess I thought, I wanted to make sure that if I was going to say I was going to do something, I was actually going to follow through with it. And you always have those few people in the back of your head that you think, well, they're probably going to talk bad about it or say something negative. And, you just have to realize there's always going to be those people, but there's going to be so many more people that'll be your cheerleaders. And that's just what I've learned later in life, is just to block out that noise and just really surround yourself with the people that are lifting you up, because those other negative voices in your head, you just have to unfollow them on Instagram and just take that negativity out of your life. And it's taken me until this age to do that, but I'm so much happier for it. And then you can, just silence the noise and not worry about it.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because that is one of my mantras is block out the noise. And I, as I'm seeing this stuff on Instagram about me and, the negative stuff, that is in my head and I have a perspective, but it's still hard. And I remember talking to when at the Southern Coterie, oh my God, why am I blanking on her name? Etiquette, help me. The etiquette.
Emily?
Yes.
Yes.
She was saying, so we met at the Southern Coterie, this really amazing woman, and she spoke and she was talking, she's an etiquette coach. And I went up to her afterwards and I was like, how do you deal with, because it's also kind of a, like, to people who don't understand what she's doing, I'm sure she gets, heat for whatever. I
Right.
believe in what she's doing. And she said exactly that. She said, you just have to block them and, put it out of your head, block out the noise. So that's good advice to remember no matter what, and no matter what age,
Right.
Whether you're going through rush or planning a wedding but just
Right.
existing, like, like we're doing, existing.
Right.
So that block out the noise mantra.
Well, I think back to Rush, because it's so funny, is that I felt like all my friends were going a different direction, and it kind of came down to the last night for me. But I was fortunate that I had a good Rush and was kind of trying to decide between 3 sororities at the end. And then I pivoted at the very end, and my philosophy was kind of like, well, everyone thinks I'm going to go one way, and I know all those girls, and all my friends are going that way. Well, I felt really comfortable at the KD house, and I don't really know all of those girls, but I know that I looked up to them and admired them and thought, I kind of want to be surrounded by people like that. And so I just pivoted and just wrote that down the last pref night. And I'm so glad I did. And my philosophy was kind of like, well, I've got all of these, I have these other friends, and if they're not going to be friends with me because I choose to do this, hopefully they won't. But that was even a pivot. So I think when you're have all of your parents' friends, your older friends that might be in a house, just really kind of listening to that inner voice inside you. I remember turning off my cell phone and going on a drive and just not wanting to hear what anybody else had to say, because I felt like I had made the right decision.
That is a very good point, and something you guys should listen to, because she found her people, but she still had, I'm talking about you now. I'm talking about you, and you're in the room, but she had connections elsewhere, but she still did what was true to her. And that just, all it did was broaden your horizon, your circle. It just gave you more people to know and meet and be all, have them all in your circle. So that's really good advice. And again, I have to say this probably every day of my life, but if you do something for someone else, or if you try to be in a certain sorority for whatever reason, besides the fact that you want to find your people, like if you're going on a reputation or what your friends are doing or what other people are saying, you are in for a world of hurt. Like it's just not gonna, you've got to be authentically you. You've got to find your fit, and you have to block out the noise. I say
Right.
that all the time. Yeah. So I think it applies to everything.
Yes. And when you were talking about dressing and, if you can't afford it or if you feel like you have to have on these certain shoes, it reminded me so much of weddings. And I can tell so early on. And it would just make me sad because it could be a year in advance of the wedding. And I could look across the table at the bride and just know that she's not going to have any fun on her wedding day. And they could have spent millions of dollars, and she's just dissecting this, the two
Mm,
shades of pink, and if they don't have this shade of pink or, what exactly it is, and then it's just really sad because, you know that they're going to be the ones kind of sitting in the corner sad because something's not going to go the way that they want it. Versus, if you can be comfortable or happy, there's weddings that are cost a lot less budget wise, but that are more fun just because the bride or groom are in their own skin or just on the dance floor, just enjoying it.
yes.
And it's kind of the same way with Rush. It's like if you feel like you're playing dress up in your, mother's suit and you can barely walk and you don't want to be wearing pantyhose or whatever it is,
Right.
and that's not you, your inner self is really only going to shine when you feel comfortable. So that's the light you want them to see.
Yeah. So I need to write that down. I'm pulling out my pen. I say that in different ways, but I really like that. Say that again, your inner self.
When you feel comfortable in your own skin, and that's everything from what you're wearing to you're surrounded by people that let you be yourself, then that's where your inner light can really shine. And, you have fun. You're not worried about what everybody else is thinking or looking at you. And that's especially when so many girls are going through recruitment. That's when you're going to stand out, when they just kind of see this glimmer in your eyes, or just that
Yes.
something is special about you and that you're kind and you're kind to everybody and you are looking people in the eye and you're wanting to engage with them and you're asking them about their life, not only your life, and you really care, then they know that you might be there for the right reasons versus, just trying to fit in the line and wear the exact same dress and the exact same shoes that everybody has. Those are the girls that are going to blend in and probably aren't going to really enjoy the sorority because they're trying to blend in and really probably aren't going to grow to leadership positions. That's just not even who they want. They want the ones that stand out, that have that glimmer in their eye, that get excited.
And that is so, so true. And it's, people are attracted to confidence, and you can be,
Yes.
and if you're prepared and you know who you are, then that's the people that, and I know I've said this on this podcast a gazillion times, but it is not about what you're wearing. And it is not if you're the skinny blonde, all the things that people think sorority girls are looking for. People want authentic. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for people who are authentic and will be authentic friends. And that doing the work to be able to show that is really the only thing. And it does not matter what you're wearing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I had one of my mentors on my podcast, and she talked about that. And she just said, we really did not care if they were wearing. I mean, everybody likes a cute outfit, but that wasn't why we were picking somebody.
Yeah.
I'm going back to your weddings, the bride. So I was not one of those girls that dreamed about her wedding day, but I really, my mom used to get that magazine Bon Appetit, and
Yes.
I don't like to cook, but on the cover was this wedding cake, and it had these white chocolate bows around it. I do love a bow.
Mm-hmm.
I love your sweater. I love
Thank you.
I love a bow. I don't wear them because what do I do? Because then I would really get, I would get some backlash on that. But that was when I met with the caterer. I was like, all I want, and I carried that Bon Appetit cover for years. Again, didn't worry about my dress. Didn't care. All I wanted was a wedding cake with these big bows on it, which I'm sure now you can get it at Publix. But back in the 70s, this was like, what I dreamed of. And so I walk into my wedding reception and there is not a bow on my cake. It is just 4 tiers of white. And I remember thinking, okay, this is the one thing I wanted and I didn't get it, but I'm going to have fun and I'm going to not think about that. I'm not going to worry about it. And, obviously had a great time. And it was more about the man I was marrying, but with the bows, but it did give me an idea. I think for my next big birthday, I'm going to have that cake with the bows on it.
You should. You deserve that cake.
So I'm just curious, what's the most expensive wedding that you planned? And you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I don't know if that puts you on the spot. We're not talking about who it is.
Yeah. Yes. I really don't like talking about budgets.
Okay. Then we don't have to talk about it.
But I do have another. I was thinking of, you might remember from the book, I do have a funny wedding cake story.
Okay, good. That's better than a budget story.
Well, so we were in Colorado. We were in Cordillera, Colorado, outside of Vail, and had a beautiful open air tent on the back of a clubhouse. And we're setting everything up. And the bride also was very into what her cake was going to look like, where it was hand stenciled, like a mountain scene around the whole cake. It was really pretty. And it was like a pale green on white. And as we were setting up in the tent, it was about 2 p.m. and we watched a huge bear walk down from the trees to the tent. We saw him coming and there weren't any walls on the tent. It was all open air. So we ran and went in the clubhouse and we're like peering through the glass window and watched the bear eat the whole wedding cake. And here we are in this little mountain town, and there was one woman that did wedding cakes, in the whole area, and she lived down in Eagle, and she actually, just did them out of her little house. And I called her, and fortunately, she had already made the wedding cake for the next weekend and had frozen it.
Oh wow!
And so we said, I don't care what it looks like. I just need a cake, because the bear ate this wedding cake and then went back up in the mountains. And so we got the wedding cake and it was fine. It was very plain, but it was completely frozen. And so I hadn't told the bride the story because she was getting dressed at her house when this happened. So she came, and I always show them how to cut the cake, and she had the cake knife and they were cutting it and it was frozen solid. So she looked at me and I was like, just smile. I'll tell you about it later. Just smile for the camera, get your toast of champagne. And she didn't even realize it didn't look like it, but it's a great story.
That is a great story. And the moral of today's Mad Rush episode is pivot, the ability to pivot. And it is so important. And that I'm sure she was glad that she had you, who obviously could come up with a plan. I don't even know what you couldn't pivot and do, because you've done it in every aspect of your life. So very impressive.
Thank you.
And very cool. Okay, so we're about to do it. Bama Rush Talk popularized the hashtag OOTD outfit of the day. For Mad Rush, I'm repurposing hashtag OOTD into observation of the day. So what is Sara Fay's hashtag observation of the day? Are you there?
What is it? Yes.
I was like, dead air. She didn't do her homework. Just any observation you can make. I had someone, Nicole Busby, she was an educational consultant and she's awesome. And she said, she has a 15-year-old son. And she said, I've noticed that all the boys have haircuts like alpacas. And then I had Lydia Finette, I recorded with her today, and she had a very deep one. So it could be anything. So maybe just something about pivoting, because that's what we talked about.
Yes. So I think that the more you can pivot, and the more that you just don't overanalyze things and you just dive in, the better you'll end up. Because when people we talked about worrying too. If you start talking about worrying or overanalyzing, you just get in your head, and that's never good. So just dive in and do it.
That is great. And that brings me to, I was thinking about something you said earlier, reminds me of, I had this client, and she was sailing through rush, and she was just had prepared. She did all the things. All of a sudden, like, I'm going to your overanalyzing thing. All of a sudden, like day 3, she starts, I mean, like crazy town. Like, and I get it because I know how this week is. I mean, it's what I do. But I mean, she was just coming up with like analyzing, like, oh, I saw this person and she was wearing a purple sweater and she knows I hate purple, so she doesn't want me in her sorority, like all kinds of, and I was like, whoa, back up. So I think that's a very good observation, being able to pivot, but also not overanalyzing. That trust that you have in yourself and what you know, don't let it go completely out of the window like this poor girl. She ended up being fine,
Exactly.
but she did overanalyze, like in a way that I was like, huh. I'm not sure how, and I literally said that to her. I'm like, so why is your brain going here right now? Like, what is happening? And
it does make you a little crazy. Weddings and rush.
Yes.
Both bring out the crazy. I mean, I've had people years later that'll come apologize to me and just say, I'm so sorry. I was really a crazy person back then. And I really will say, you were? No, you were actually pretty normal, right. But people go to this different place in their head.
Yes, that is so true. And I could see how it would be. That's another synergy between you and me. Like I could see, or I'm sure, like that's the quintessential 2 places where people do just kind of lose their mind and just are like, all rational thought. And that's what we're there for. Like you said, let's not say that a bear ate the cake. Let's smile and get through it. And that's what I try to do. But it's a little fascinating to me sometimes, the leaps that people's minds take. And luckily I'm good at calming people down and talking them out of their trees. But you apparently are also.
And there's life on the other side of it. There's life, after your wedding day, then the marriage starts. This is actually just the beginning, not the end.
Exactly.
Same with Rush. Your relationships are starting with all of your new friends and everything. It's not, the end all be all.
Exactly. And so getting there is just the very beginning. So that's a good point. We're going to use that as your observation. Not that the other one was getting there is just the beginning. I like that. I'm writing that down too. All right. So tell people where they can get your book and or follow you or find you.
Yes. So the book's called The Through Line, Finding Happiness Through the Curveballs of Life, Family, and Business. And you can get it on Amazon or Target and Barnes & Noble.
It's awesome. It's a great book. And here's what it looks like.
Thank you. And my Instagram is at Sara Fay Egan or at Sara Fay Egan Events.
And that's EGAN, y'all. So it'll all be in the show notes, but I'm so grateful for you to being here today. And I loved your stories and I love even more your message. And it's so in sync with mine. And I'm just honored to have met you and I appreciate you being here.
You as well. Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Welcome to Time Out with Trisha. Because can you really give advice if you don't speak about yourself in the third person? I don't think so. This is exactly how I speak to my clients. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Now let's get into it. So as you just heard, Sara Fay had to pivot in her life pretty dramatically. Less dramatically, but still a time when you're going to need to pivot is when you're going through rush. When you get your schedules back, sometimes they're not going to look like what you expect they were going to look like. And you have to pretty quickly come up with a plan B with positivity. So I want you to be aware that this is going to happen and so that you can have a plan in place, at least in your mind, for during rush, when you get your schedule and it doesn't look like you expected, which happens to everybody. And remember, it only takes one. But what I'm going to tell you to do is give yourself 5 minutes to process, cry, but then you got to switch your mindset. You're going forward. You have no choice. So have a plan in place, which includes washing your face, splashing your face with cold water, and a mind reset that you owe it to yourself to give every bit of positivity and openness to your remaining options. You don't have a choice. So make the decision before it happens to you that, one, you know it's going to happen to you. So you are going to uniquely take this, what you're going to feel is rejection, take this rejection and channel it into your plan B. So very long-winded way of saying have a plan B in place because you are going to feel the sting of rejection at some point during the week. And what you do with it is what's going to set you apart. And that's it for Time Out with Trisha. We'll see you on another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. For additional Rush tips, updates, and more, please follow me on Instagram at Rush with Confidence. If you would like to reach out to us or for more information, please email info@madrushpod.com. This podcast is produced by Collier Landry and Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Trisha Adams.